Hi, this is Josh Spicer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoyed this critical thought, a detailed discussion on game design, and be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future critical thought topics. Alright, for today's critical thought, I want to return to the topic of side grades and game balance. Because this is again one of those topics that we can return to on any number of occasions to discuss, and I have a few things I was thinking about today, specifically with the idea of side grades. Or as we've talked about before, a side grade is when an option will provide unique benefit, but at the same time having a unique downside. And a really good example of that, of course, would be the items from Team Fortress 2. And each one of the items that was added over the years since the game went free to play always provides something special, but at a deficit somewhere else. For instance, I remember a rocket launcher for the soldier would, I think, do increased direct damage, but would not have any crit chance whatsoever. And it's always interesting when you're balancing games around side grades or these unique options that are better in some aspects but worse in others. On the previous video, when we talked about game balance, we talked about Overwatch. And Overwatch is a really good example of this. Each character by themselves is 100% overpowered. They each have some sort of unique skill or perk that in any other game would be considered game breaking. From McCree's ability to kill an entire team, Reinhardt's shield, Roadhog's grapple hook, similar to Blitzcrank from League of Legends, and so on. But the point is the difficulty when it comes to balancing multiple side grade or unique options. And the reason for this I was thinking about is from playing Gwent again. Now, if you watch my latest stream of Gwent, then you know two things about me. One, I don't like to play popular builds, and apparently two, I don't like to win the meta. And one of the challenges of playing games like Gwent, or anything that's built on competitive play, is trying to get around what's considered the best options. And when we say best, that can mean different things depending upon the month, the latest patch, new expansion, you name it. And as we talked about when it comes to meta design, it's a never-ending struggle. But for today's critical thought, I want to actually focus on something I've been thinking about when it comes back to side grades. Now, in Gwent, there are a lot of crazy card combinations, and probably more coming if anything's indicated by possible more cards being added in over time. Or I should say there's a really good chance because Gwent's card number is a bit low compared to other CCGs at the moment. But when it comes to the game, what makes or breaks a good Gwent strategy is, of course, card combinations and synergies. Whether it's using Ciri to get a free card essentially on the next round, combining Roach with your golds, and more examples that, for people who don't watch Gwent, will probably not have any idea what I'm talking about. And one of the things I really like about when I play with Nilfgaard is that there are some very crazy combinations that you can come up with. For instance, the other night I was thinking about a combination of fake Ciri with the card Dudu, DU, for those of you who don't know, and essentially like a Beauty and the Beast combo that I was thinking about. Of course, for those of you who watch my spy plays of Nilfgaard, you know I really like the card Letho for being able to decimate the enemy's board and basically take all that power in for himself. And again, one of the hallmarks of great design is providing these special combinations, these unique tactics that really come about through the interaction of mechanics. For instance, let's say we have a game where you have three random perks. Let's say one lets you do more damage while you're airborne, another one that lets you float while you're in midair, and another one that lets you, let's say, launch an enemy into the air. Now, those three by themselves wouldn't be considered all that overpowered or all that special. But for those of you who understand how mechanics interact with each other, I'm sure you're probably thinking of the super combination that's going in my head right now. But herein lies the problem, and where this kind of danger of side grades can come into play. Because the more options you give to the player, the harder it becomes to ultimately balance them. Now, a minute ago, I talked about some of the combinations I was thinking about with Gwent. And while they are interesting and they're fancy and unique, the problem, however, is just how useful they are. If, for instance, I have a crazy combination that will win me the game in 7 moves, but you have something that will win in 5 moves, well, who's going to win out every time? And herein lies the problems of side grades. And in many cases, it's very easy to add breadth but not depth to them. It doesn't matter if you have 500 pieces of gear, character perks, options, set items, you name it, if there's only 20 that are ever really viable. And viable is the key word in this. In an earlier post or video, I talked about the famous Sid Meier quote that a video game, or to paraphrase, a video game is a series of interesting choices. And a major part of what makes something interesting is ultimately the utility that's built around it. I could throw together an insane deck in Gwent of just crazy combinations that I don't think anyone has actually either thought of or were crazy enough to try on a recording or stream. The problem, though, how many times am I actually going to win with said combination? Because herein lies the great challenge of this, is that if you come up with a crazy combination that no one's ever thought of and wins, guess what? Everyone's going to start using it. And then that becomes a new meta. And if that becomes a new meta, eventually that will have to be nerfed and changed. And if it gets changed too much, then that unique combination gets thrown out the window. And that is where this trickiness when it comes to balancing side grades come into play. Because when you're dealing with something that is unique or is designed to be a very specific use or situation, how do you know when it's balanced? And for those of you hoping that I have some grand sage wisdom that will answer this, unfortunately I don't. As we said on a previous post, when most game designers think about competitive or just simply balance and utility when it comes to games, they try to go by the 50-50 rule, meaning that a situation or an item should always be working within 50% of the time. So if I use A, B, and C, 50% of the time I'm going to win. And then the other 50% of the time I'm not going to win. But, as we've talked about before, there is a very big fallacy with that. And that is the human element. If I have a combination that is crazy and it's going to win, and you can just simply beat me with one card, then what was the point of that? And going back to Gwent, I've had plenty of examples of that. I've came up with some combinations of swapping powers, using this card called Fringilla, which basically takes the power of the card on the left and transfers it to the card on the right to essentially double my power. Now that all sounds great, but that can also be easily eliminated with one Scorch, a D-Bomb, resetting the power, or simply just figuring out a way to knock that power back down. And this is going back to what I said earlier. If I can win in 6 moves, but you can beat me in 2 moves, then no matter how unique or special that combination or that ability is, it's not, the utility just isn't there. And this is why when it comes to designing a game, you have to be careful about throwing in so many choices that they tend to basically mess with each other or override each other. For instance, if I have 10 weapons that do 3 to 5 points of damage and then have a unique condition, let's say plus 5 to aerial units, plus 5 to fire units, and this is separate between those 10 items. And then let's say my 11th item simply does 20 to 30 points of damage. And this raises the question, why should I take any of those other 10 items when this one item basically beats it all? Now, of course, as we've said in the last critical thought, when it comes to this kind of balance, there are ways to get around it. We can make that one weapon maybe be slower or harder to find. But the question, the issue still remains. When you're dealing with unique situations or conditional situations, how can you properly balance them? Because again, if I had come up with a crazy combination, let's say one of my crazy card combinations in Gwent is all powerful. Let's say I've somehow stumbled across the magical holy trinity of cards that when played together is going to win me every round. Well, guess what happens when that gets out? Everyone's going to start using it. The meta shifts towards those three cards, and then most likely CD Projekt Red is going to nerf them. But again, how do you nerf something that its whole utility is built on its unique situation? In the stream the other night, I talked about Ciri as a gold card and why it's considered to be one of the best cards in the game, simply because of the fact that it returns to your hand if you lose a round, thereby allowing you to gain almost double and sometimes triple card advantage if you play it right. And even if you don't use it right and it comes back to your hand, well, you can trade in for a better card and you still get the use out of it. And this is a card that in almost every situation that you play it, it's going to bring value to you. Even if you lose the first round and you can't get the return benefit anymore, you can still play it for its strength. Now, with that said, though, with so many people using it, you would think that you would need to nerf something like this. But therein lies the great problem. How do you nerf something when its unique factor is what drives it? If you remove that ability for it to come back to the hand, then you rob the card of not only all of its personality, but the entire reason people use it. And this goes with any kind of game with unique options, side grades, and so on. About a week ago, I was reading some posts of people lamenting the changes to Roadhog and what they're doing in Overwatch. They're making I believe his shotgun weapon, instead of being heavy damage but slow, they're going to make it do weaker damage but fire faster. Now, of course, that changes the entire dynamic of the character. And therein lies the problem. If there is an issue with an option, how can you change it while still keeping its unique utility and situation? And again, there is no answer to this. And that's why I'm going to throw it to you guys watching. For those of you, especially those of you who are game designers or have built games built around multiple items or abilities, how do you think about game balance like that? If you have something that is unique, it has a very situational use, but that situational use when the planets are aligned makes it have a, let's say, 90% of win rate, what do you do? Because again, it goes both ways. If that situation pops up that this card or this combination or whatever wins, what does that do to the rest of the game? Or to another player? For instance, if I play card A, B, and C in Gwent and I win every time, what does that mean to someone who's playing against me and they see A, B, and they know I have C? Are they just going to forfeit? But again, if you nerf it down to the point where that combination doesn't even have any value anymore, then those items become useless, and then becomes shifted back towards things that are more general, but have a greater chance of winning. Again, in an earlier post, I presented this problem. If I have two weapons, one that does 3 to 5 points of damage, and another one that does 20 to 30, why would you ever take the former if that is the only stat difference between the two? And as we've said, when it comes to balancing games, especially those built on side grades, unique characters, or even just having randomly or procedurally generated gear, you always have to think in terms of balance. You don't want the player to get an item 1 hour in that will last them 100 hours. But if everything is just being a swirling mix of stats, and it really just boils down to this weapon does 5 points of damage, and this one does 6, and then this one does 4, and it's just being very simple, you're just going to overwhelm the player with a bunch of useless choices. And I've played many games built on ARPG design like that, where it just becomes all lost in the wash. If I have a weapon that does 5 points of fire damage and 4 points of, let's say, blunt damage, what's the difference between a weapon that does 5 points of blunt damage and 4 points of fire damage? And again, we could easily wax philosophically about this for the next 10 minutes or so. But let's wrap it up here. So, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. If you enjoyed the piece, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you have any future ideas for topics regarding vlogs. And check back daily for more design discussions here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. So, until next time, have a great night. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBicer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBicer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.